Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next City of Echoes chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 26 and 27. I'll mention once again I do have YouTube channel membership available and also Patreon if you'd like to help support the channel. And if you come in at the higher tier, you'll gain early access to videos in this series and other exclusive videos as the months go on, obviously. But yeah, let's get into this. So we had a really notable last chapter. Jin now has better context for kind of what's been going on in Ba Sing Se to a certain degree. It's changed to a certain degree what she has to do. So now it's all about, can she actually get the support to kind of go on a mission to Lake Laogai? They want to do it, but you know, they're still part of the Silver Fangs. There's still an expectation that they do things. So let's address this. And the obvious thing is, of course, that we have to bring our other kind of main character in on this, Xuan. So that's what we do here. We're going to ask Xuan for help because he's been more heavily involved in the Silver Fangs before everyone else, of course. So yeah, Jin goes to the apothecary, asks to see Xuan. She's eventually gets to see him. He brings her into the back to kind of talk about this. She is immediately kind of intrigued to see that, like, he straight away is kind of concerned, like, you know, everything okay. She appreciates the concern that he's showing. So their dynamic is beginning to evolve, of course. And she just notes, I have a request to submit to your aunt. So, like, referencing Aunt Sumi, of course. So this is why he knows what it's about. She then explains some of the context that she's got recently. She's already kind of told him about the whole Susu situation, but now the idea is, okay, she's working for the Dai Li, something has happened to her. I don't know if she knows what she's signed up for here, basically. I need help to find her to kind of get her out of this situation. I also want to know if Aunt Sumi, in negotiating the deal to make this happen, was aware that she potentially, like, knew what was being done with the girls basically when they were taken away. She wants some more context on that in that regard. So yeah, Xuan is just kind of like, okay, yeah, I'll do my best to get you a meeting, but there is an emergency meeting with the Silver Fangs coming up. The leaders have called an emergency meeting, but they don't really think too much of it, but you know, they assume that there'll be time for your request at some point as well. And she's just like, I have to believe him. I do believe him that there is a way to save Susu. So there's a little bit of a kind of scene before we kind of get there, but it's mostly just Jin at the Wen bakery. She makes Grandmother Wen's new medicine, of course. There's a nice scene here where the grandmother thanks Jin for all of her help. It's seen and acknowledged, and kind of Jin kind of tears up at such a kind of honest and sincere kind of thank you about this whole situation. But she's also aware that, like, she really has to do something to kind of fix the situation for the family. I don't know if I could bear the knowledge that I have that Susu didn't only give up her presence for her family, but her mind as well. And that's the idea of, like, if she was to kind of tell the family Susu's kind of current situation, so instead she's focusing on trying to fix it before that happens. Bringing her back is the main thing that she needs to do. And then as we end this first of the two chapters here, she joins up with Smellerbee and Longshot as they arrive to the kind of secret location where this meeting is taking place. They note that there is a false door in the middle of kind of one of the routes that Jin kind of opens up to kind of get them through into the kind of entertainment kind of area where this is all happening. So yeah, they get in there. We see Dr. John is there, Xuan is there. And yeah, just in time, they're about to begin. So ending the chapter on this kind of note of they're about to begin is, of course, the emergency meeting is super, super important. And obviously, if you've been following where we are in ATLA, you kind of immediately probably know what the big emergency meeting that affects everything in this big organization that is kind of controlling things to a certain degree in the lower ring. You kind of know what this is about to be, but we'll get into it here as we start chapter 27. So yeah, Aunt Sumi is here and the singer is also here. So both leaders are at this meeting, obviously. She thanks everyone for kind of basically arriving here. But there has been terrible news from the palace. We've gathered you all here to prepare for what will be coming. This has been confirmed from multiple sources within the council. So what the report is, we've received multiple confirmations the Fire Nation has infiltrated the palace and taken over the Dai Li. The Earth King has disappeared. And there's shock. No one knows how to react to this. It's a crazy announcement. It continues. They will open the gates to the Fire Nation army soon, and you will see their war machines upon our streets and in the skies above. The singer's voice projects even louder than the judge's. Tonight at midnight, there will be one gate remaining still open to those passing through, the northeastern gate. And before they can continue, multiple people in the room at this big meeting immediately get up to leave. They are fleeing for safety through the only gate that kind of remains open for people to get out. So Smellerbee is not happy about this, a bunch of cowards at the Silver Fangs basically that have immediately left. But in this situation, can you really blame the people who something absolutely crazy has happened here? The Fire Nation finally taking Ba Sing Se. They're doing what they can to survive. Ansumi takes over once again. For those of you who remain, I advise you to go into hiding, stay unnoticed, be careful. They will try to root you out. We will have need of you in the future. They can burn us, but the earth remains. And everyone in the audience is like, the earth remains. That's the notable kind of chant here. And Jin is shocked by this. Xuan is there to kind of support Jin in a kind of nice little moment. He kind of, in the middle of this kind of craziness, something huge has happened. He does kind of note to her that, like, I'm sorry, I don't think you'll get a meeting with the leaders tonight. But Jin is kind of understanding because her very personal thing, it still matters, but there are bigger concerns kind of right now temporarily while we deal with what does the Fire Nation taking over the city kind of mean for the residents of the kind of lower ring. We know what it means for the kind of wider world, but, life kind of still has to go on type thing is kind of what we're talking about here. Smellerbee is quite upset about some of what's happening here. We'll help Jin even if they're not willing to. Xuan is kind of like, what are you going to do? But he's immediately kind of taken off. He has to do something kind of with his mother. So there's a bit of a kind of discussion here. So Smellerbee and Longshot ask Jin, okay, what are you going to do now? Given that, like, stuff is about to go off. She's going to go back to Gong Gong and see kind of what's going on there. See to him. And then afterwards, they'll work out the Lake Laogai stuff. That's what Smellerbee and Longshot are going to do. They're going to investigate a way to get into Lake Laogai. From their perspective, that's all they're focused on. We keep our promises to our friends. So this is them continuing kind of Jet's legacy, but also kind of the promise to Jin as well. This is what they're going to do to kind of try to help things. A fun little moment here. Jin hugs both of them here, and they're a little bit surprised at this, but they do hug her back. So they really are kind of friends at this point, which is really nice to see just in this book. Like, again, did you at all expect this would be part of the team in this book? Jin pairing up with Smellerbee and Longshot, and also like Xuan. It's interesting. So yeah. Then she, on her way back to Gong Gong, she quickly goes back to the Wen Bakery just to kind of warn Mama Wen that, like, hey, ration your ingredients. It might be difficult for a while to get anything in. Just a bit of advice. And right as dawn hits, it turns out the information was correct. The explosions begin at dawn. The Fire Nation learned quickly that during the siege many years ago that it would be very difficult to break in through the walls. And she just notes to herself, how does one take down the impenetrable city? By having its people open the gate. When Gong Gong finally meets up with Jin, she can't bring herself to tell him the truth about kind of what's actually happening to the city. So she just says that there's some construction happening on the other street and it's going to be loud. She's trying to keep him calm, aware of, like, it's probably best to not try and kind of overdo it here, given the kind of situation that they're in. She doesn't want to lie to him, but she feels it's something she has to do in the middle of, like, everything happening. But yeah, they try to go on with things, do the calligraphy work that they still have to do, but then as explosions continue to go on outside, there's eventually a knock at the door. Something is put on the door. Jin goes outside to check, and it is this message in red, basically. It says, "Notice, citizens of Ba Sing Se, you've been blessed by the benevolence of the great Fire Lord Ozai, divine ruler of the Fire Nation, to welcome you as a territory in the grand joining of nations to become one. Follow us to your glorious destiny." And immediately, you know, when she's outside, she can see smoke coming up from all across the city. Then all of a sudden, a boulder gets hurled like all the way across the city, lands on top of some houses nearby, and there's just this disaster is happening as like fighting is happening. It's just this crazy chaotic situation as buildings begin to collapse. Of course, children start to cry, people are weeping, and yeah, the idea is as we end here, rubble piling up, the invasion has begun. And it's this crazy, shocking kind of moment as Ba Sing Se is taken over in this moment. So it speaks to, of course, where we are right now. It means we're right at the kind of end, almost like post-book 2 in this, because the Fire Nation is actually like properly coming in. Whereas, of course, 220 kind of ends on the note of primarily it has fallen, and we assume in the gap between, it's when it truly falls. We actually, this is where we have to reference 301 and some of the flashback that we get when Lo and Lee introduce Zuko and Azula back to the Fire Nation. This is where we actually see the fall of Ba Sing Se. Now, interestingly, there is another Jin scene in the middle of this. You see Jin in Pow's tea shop. As the kind of soldiers march down the streets, of course. Now, the timing on this one is not super clear on exactly like sort of like when this takes place. And the idea is like, is it inherently retconned by the way the book does it? Because I don't believe the book ever directly shows us this scene. I don't think Pow's tea shop really comes up again, or certainly we don't go back to it again, I think, for the rest of the book. It's quite like action focused for the rest of the book. So we certainly don't see this moment. So are they saying it happens off screen? There's room for that because there is a few times where like some days pass. Is that what they're trying to do here? And then because this is right at the start, and then that scene was also sort of meant to show sort of right at the start. Admittedly, that was more showing, I suppose, when they took down the walls, which could have been like a little bit afterwards. I don't think this scene itself is directly contradicting the 301 thing. It's more that this is the section of the book where it feels like the stuff that happens in or around this section is where it starts to not reference the kind of previously established material super well. So the 301 scene just doesn't get covered in the book. Going home again, which is definitely after this, after like the scene in the book, certainly, but not too far away. Like, so we're coming up to the point where this scene from this comic should be happening. But again, this comic is not referenced in the book. They don't show us this scene, and there's no reference to her having seen Lee again. So there is still a weird sense where it feels like, to a certain degree, either these scenes are just meant to happen off screen or they've been retconned to a certain degree. I will say my general thoughts on this is just that I think it is weird that you have canon material with Jin, and this Jin book, which otherwise references like all of her scenes and all of the information surrounding her, just doesn't reference these points. That's very odd to me, especially because if you do get the special edition version of this book from Barnes & Noble or Indigo, instead of a full deleted chapter, what the extra pages is basically the process for how the book comes together from the writer, from Avatar Studios. And they cover a few moments of like, here's what it initially was, here's the notes that was given, and here's the kind of like fixed kind of scene. And it's kind of interesting, and it's meant to show how smooth the process is, but then you realize that the book also has moments where it seems like that process didn't quite work, in that like, hey, the whole Feng Pao situation, what were the notes given about that? given that, like, we know for a fact Judy Lin did her research apparently by looking at the wiki and stuff like that, but like apparently never came across that in the episode you're directly referencing the character's name is directly said. That's like a bit like, how did that not happen, in terms of the writer or Avatar Studios potentially catching that moment? That's kind of, you know, odd to me. Other ones you can tell it's quite purposeful, in terms of like the whole change with like the fire fountain kind of stuff, firelight fountain, and there having to be two of them. That makes sense, and that's an understandable retcon. But some of the other stuff just feels like, what happened here? But yeah, this is just sort of stuff like, as we go through the remaining chapters, we'll just keep our eye out for sort of like exact details on like maybe when this scene could take place, or when this scene could take place. If there is any wording in the chapters that either highlights that those two scenes are retconned or could happen, that's what we're kind of looking for on a more kind of technical point. But still, these two chapters, I think, quite strong in terms of just everything suddenly going wrong. The book, from Jin's perspective, being, okay, something crazy happens to her with what happens with Susu. But it's kind of normal, you know, it's an incident that happens to a family in the city. Jin does her best to try and get her back by making money. But now the actual plot of ATLA has thrown so many spanners into the works of what she's trying to accomplish. And the idea is, it's a chaotic situation now. Can Jin and Gong Gong kind of survive this, let alone get to the point where they can organize like going to Lake Laogai or doing something to get Susu back? That's the setup in the immediate kind of next part of the book. But like I said, it's kind of action focused the whole way through. We're just kind of doing stuff for the rest of the book. There's no time to breathe here in terms of just like, and we did normal deliveries like normal and went on to the next thing. It's just kind of boom, 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 mostly for the rest of the book, which is quite exciting. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on chapters 26 and 27. Otherwise, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.